right. Good morning, everyone. Morning. Thank you for being here. So on behalf of the Ontario Electrical League, I'd like to thank you for being here today as we highlight our survey results regarding racial restrictions in the electrical industry. My name is Bao Seong. I'm the communication specialist here at OEL. And before we start off with some opening remarks from our panelists here, I'd like to introduce you to them. We have Stephen Sell right here. He is the president of the OEL. We have Don Gosin right next to him, who is the Ontario College of Trades Board of Governors Chair. Dave Atkinson, who is past chair of the OEL Board of Directors, all of whom will be speaking today and answering any questions you may have afterwards. Lastly, we also have Alexander Klusek, who, thank you for coming. He is a guest speaking on behalf of his experience trying to land an apprenticeship position. So I'll first hand over the podium to Stephen to begin. Thank you.
Thanks, Bao. Good morning, everyone. A couple of months ago, the OEL, in keeping with our advocacy efforts, distributed a survey to our membership with just one question. We asked, if the apprenticeship ratios were reduced to 1-to-1, how many apprentices would you hire? And as all of you know, apprentices are essential to the future of the electrical contracting trade in Ontario. And we know that a skills gap exists today where we're seeing a shortage of qualified new electricians, and the situation will only worsen as veteran electricians in the baby boomer era continue to retire. We received 127 responses from the survey, and 73% of the employers said they would hire more apprentices if the ratios were changed to 1-to-1. Based off the OEL's numbers alone, that would mean a total of 307 more apprentices. 307 more people who can land an apprenticeship and start working in their field. As staggering as these results are for our organization, it's not hard to imagine what the results would indicate if every electrical employer were surveyed. To elaborate on these survey results, almost half of those surveyed would hire either 1 or 2 more apprentices. Over 6% would hire 10 or more apprentices. To become a qualified electrician in Ontario, an apprentice must complete 80 to 90% of their training on the job. An apprenticeship is a commitment of 9,000 hours, including 900 hours of in-class instruction. As our survey showed, employers recognize the value of hiring apprentices, but they are challenged by the restrictive and confusing government requirements for the ratio of journeyman electricians to apprentices. In Ontario, this ratio is the highest and most complex of any trade in the country. Employers have difficulty navigating and complying by the criteria, and replacing retiring journey persons has become a concerning issue. We know young people, as well as more experienced Ontarians looking to change careers, are excited about joining the trade. But all too often, they run into trouble finding an apprenticeship or completing it. The answer is logical: modernizing ratios today. The future of the trade and the educational development of the tradespeople depend on it. I'd now like to introduce our OEL past chair of our board of directors, Dave Atkinson, to the podium to make a few remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Speaking as a current business owner and a past apprentice many years ago, I've seen the difficulty and the letdown people face when one aspect preventing them from working is a racial restriction. Yes, there is a skills there is a skills shortage, and yes, we need to change so the next generation of tradespeople can move forward. Restricting journey persons to apprentice ratios equals a missed opportunity. It means wasted time, energy, resources, when something as simple as a 1-to-1 ratio could be the solution to many contractors' day-to-day issues. The frustrating process has done nothing except limit the amount of potential jobs in Ontario, and the electrical industry has suffered long enough. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dave. So I'd like to now invite to the podium Don Gosin, who is the chair of the Board of Governors from the Ontario College of Trades.
Thanks, Pao. And thank you, the Ontario Electrical League, for allowing us to be part of your event today. I have roots with the OEL going back many years, so it's a special time for me to be here. And many of you would know that I did spend 38 years as an electrical contractor, and we worked within the ratios, but for our company, it was a real cramp, and in many cases, it limited our ability to grow. We tended to grow from within. We paid special attention to the hiring of our apprentices, and we always attempted to keep them when they reached journey person status. In fact, the 3 gentlemen that took over my company all served their apprenticeship at Gosen Electric. So the process worked, but in busy times, the ratio was restrictive, and it limited, as I said, our ability to grow. So I'm excited to see some additional attention being put on that topic here today. The College of Trades certainly has a role in the review of ratios, and ratio review is now on the schedule. It last occurred a little over 4 years ago. Although we administer the process at the Ontario College of Trades, we don't have complete control of that. The Appointments Council, which is established within the ministry, appoints the panel that reviews the submissions. So that's out of our hands. Criteria, I believe, is already established, so it's kind of a legislated thing. So in order for the review to go forward again, we need to ensure that there's a process that puts people in place on those panels, and that the criteria is something that we can agree with. When we talk about the concerns around ratios, I think one of the things, and it's been mentioned, there was just a report delivered recently on modernization of apprenticeships, and I think, Stuart, you're part of that. But it mentioned that a lot of times if we go in rural areas or smaller centers, the ratios are a real problem. There was an example of a small electrical contractor who had 2 sons that wanted to be electricians, but he could only, because of the ratios, sign one up as an apprentice. And what might work in Toronto does not always work in other areas. So criteria like that, the age of our aging workforce, the demographics and regional disparities where we have really active construction environment in different areas, this all needs to be part of our considerations for ratio review. And in the future, with attention provided by events like this, we hope to make sure those topics are considered. Just one other note. Improving or easing of ratios doesn't solve all of the problems that exist within our apprenticeship system. And our apprenticeship system is so vital to our trades, and not just the electrical trade, but all our trades. And ratios are not only a problem in electrical. So I'm excited that this group is bringing that topic forward. But we know that apprenticeships are partnerships. They're a partnership between the apprentice, the employer, the training delivery people, the government, and the Ontario College of Trades. So that partnership needs to be in balance, and those people need to be committed, working together in order to ensure that our apprenticeship system works and that the kind of improvements we need to stay competitive are made. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Don. All right, so thank you everyone for those remarks. Lastly, I'd like to introduce you to Alex Klusik. Alex is gracious enough to join us today, and please welcome him. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. I am a graduate of a 2-year electrical technician program from Sheridan College. I graduated a year ago. Should I speak into the mic or? Oh, okay. I always knew it wouldn't be the easiest to land an apprenticeship here. I knew that going in, but I felt that if I worked hard enough, that I would eventually get somewhere. Many places I had applied to appreciated my effort to come in person with my resume in hand, but often they would decline, citing that the apprentice to journeyman ratio would prevent them from taking in new hires. So, as someone who has worked tirelessly to break into the industry, as someone who has heard no multiple times, I'm starting to lose interest in in the trades altogether. I'm sure I'm one of several hundreds across Ontario feeling defeated and let down. And today I'm still contemplating if I should keep looking or give up altogether. It's not been easy to break into, and I hope things can change in the future so that everybody can, just move on and, work hard. That's pretty much all I got to say.
Alex, what are you doing for work right now?
Right now, I've been working just as an assembler in a company nearby where I live. It's somewhat related. It's not an electrical contractor at the moment, but I'm still looking.
Okay, and you want to go into the trades? And you still want to be an electrician, or do you take other trades?
I have been contemplating trying some other trades. It's on the table. I'm still in the kind of considering my options.
And how many applications do you think you've sent out? How many times have you asked for work?
In total,
Since you started?
since I've started,
Like how many different companies you asked to work for?
I'd say at the beginning, I would send quite a few a week. I'd apply at least 10 a week.
So 10 a week for 10 weeks?
Yeah, when I was starting out, it was like that.
Okay, so you've applied for 100 companies
I would say so.
at least?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Alex before moving to the next question period? No? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'd like to open the floor to any questions that anyone in here might have for any of our panelists here. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand and let us know where you're from, if you're from a publication or your company, and I'll open the floor to everyone here. Small room though, but yes.
Stephen Hamilton. I'm from the Ontario Home Builders Association. So I was wondering, I guess in the report you guys have put out, it was specific to a questionnaire you sent out to your members, and you had about 175 respond or something?
127 responses.
127 responses. So I guess in total, in the entire electrical trade, how many opportunities do you think are out there that we'd be able to unlock if the ratio is changed to 1-to-1? Do you have any sense, like a ballpark figure, how many?
So assuming that's a standard response you'll get across the trade, you're looking at, well, you'd be in the thousands, because we're at 300 just at 127 employers. So there's 8,000 electrical contractors in the province.
Okay. And when you sent the questionnaire out, did you find there was, as Dawn mentioned, there was kind of there's a rural GTA kind of divide in terms of demand and the ability to take on apprentices? Did that show up in your survey?
We didn't ask for the geographics,
Okay.
but just based on our membership base, it'd be a stronger rural than, like most of those responses wouldn't be City of Toronto.
Right.
They'd be outside Toronto proper, so you'd be smaller municipalities and rural areas.
Any other questions? Yes. Kathy, sorry.
Hi, Kathy Frederickson, Electrical Contractors Association of Ontario. This question is for Dawn. Dawn, OCON is actually behind in the ratio review process. Can you tell us exactly when that is going to happen for the electrical trade?
The ratio review process is set to occur every 4 years. And so the last ratio review was just a little over 4 years ago, we asked Ministry of Labor to allow us to start the ratio review following the election, to get away from the election cycle. So I know our CEO, George Gritsiotis, is waiting to meet with the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities now, and I'm sure ratio review will be a big part of that discussion. So it's set to start. And I would say in September. It's a bit of a process, and it takes time. So that, you know, for the kind of concerns that are being put forward today, that that too is a concern. Could I'm anticipating. I think the time frame there, it can take us out like 9 months before the thing is completed. Yes.
Could you talk a bit more about exactly what you're advocating, the 1-to-1 ratio? It's a very complex ratio, 1-to-1. You know, it's my understanding, I look in the College of Trades, 1-to-1, 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 and then 1-to-6. So it's more streamlined. Could you talk a bit about what the difference will be? Anybody
So
that you're advocating for?
So the one thing that I run across in talking to contractors is it's simplified. So at 1-to-1, they know how many journeymen they have, how many apprentices they can have. With the current ratio, a lot of contractors aren't even sure how many apprentices they can have. So they have to go to the College of Trades website, use the calculator, and it'll tell them how many apprentices they can actually have indentured. So it just simplifies the system. And if you look at ratios across Canada, a lot of them are 1-to-1, or in some cases even lower.
So are you, just to be clear, are you asking, this seems like a very urgent problem, the way you positioned it? Like there's spots that could be filled if the regulation was changed. So I'm just curious, the current ratio structure was put in place from a College of Trades process. Is this group asking for the government to, is your ask to government that they should change the regulation now? Or are you asking for an accelerated College of Trades ratio review process? Or I'm just kind of curious how you're communicating this to the college and to the government.
So do you want to ask from the college perspective? And I can answer from the industry perspective.
I'd be interested to hear the industry response to that, because as I mentioned, the time frame as it's established would put us out there, and I'm sorry I'm not right on here, but I could see it being another 9 months if it follows the usual process. So, which for a lot of contractors that have been living with restrictive ratios for a long time, for a lot of people like Alex that have been seeking employment and hearing that ratio excuse or answer or restriction at every turn, and you know, even 9 months or a year is a long time.
So from the industry standpoint, the sooner we could make a reduction in ratios, the better. Because if you look at how long it takes to train a journeyman, it's a 9,000-hour process, so that's 5 years. So add 9 months to the college review process, now your first new apprentices that you bring into the system are 6 years out. What the retirements look like 6 years from now. So we need to be able to fill that pipeline so that we've got tradespeople ongoing in the industry.
Oh, was Don going to weigh in on that, or?
No.
No, okay. Anthony Gaffigan, Electrical Business Magazine. Defenders of the 1-to-1 ratio point to the safety aspect for apprentices. Like Gavin Howe, he would be a champion that comes to mind. So how do you square the business aspect against the safety aspect? Do you have any stats of your own that show there's no difference safety-wise, everything is still good regardless? Like, what would you say to that?
You guys want me to answer that one, or do you have a response?
It's a bit of a wide-ranging question, and it kind of opens up other things like, you know, where the ratio is 1-to-1, what's been the experience. having already mentioned that ratios as they are was a bit of a cramp for my company. I still believe that, and I'm speaking personally, not really for the College of Trades here, I believe that ratios have a place, and the big concern would come around safety. So again, you want to see data that ensures that not only safety for the apprentice, but also a good quality training environment, and so it comes down to the commitment from the employer to ensure that there's employment for that apprentice, that the safety programs are in place, that the training standards are being followed, and if possible, that they're learning as much as possible from that training standard, and that the mentoring process, which is really what that ratio is all about, that it's occurring, and that again leads to another mention that not every electrical contractor takes apprentices, and why is that? And not every journey person is a good mentor, so there's some other checks and balances that need to be looked at when we talk about easing the ratios. And I think where there's been concerns expressed by other groups about easing the ratios, I think that's where their concerns tend to come from.
So just to elaborate on your question, Anthony, so response to the safety piece is, one thing a lot of people don't realize is the ratio doesn't apply on the job site. So we often hear talk about, from a safety angle, you're looking at supervision of apprentices, no question. But the ratio is applied to the company as a whole. So some of the examples we've used in the past is if you have a small company that's got 4 journey persons and 4 apprentices, you can still be in compliance with no journey persons on site and 4 apprentices on site, because it doesn't apply to the job site specific. So from a safety perspective, and that's Don's point about a little more complex than just the straight ratio, we need to make sure that the apprentices are properly supervised with journeymen, but it's not necessarily a ratio that does that.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yes, or
Also, just to expand on that, a 1-to-1 ratio is a good thing because one electrician would be responsible for that apprentice, right? So if you had like a 6-to-1 ratio, who's really responsible for that apprentice? Somebody is. The master is. So is the master responsible for 1,000 apprentices?
Somebody, nobody, everybody?
Right. Right, so that's a concern. So my experience working for Magna was that they assigned me apprentices, and that apprentice was my responsibility. So that's 1-to-1. So if we're gonna end up there anyway.
sorry, Don, I think you have a question next.
Yeah, I was wondering how we ended up, the process, so the 2014 review, and so this, every 4 years there's a review. We ended up with this set of ratios, and you're saying it's misguided and it doesn't work for you. But what was the process, and who were the advocates at that time that encouraged the College of Trades to arrive at that you all find so deadly wrong now? I'm just wondering how they're obviously, those voices are still around. Mm-hmm. They'll still be advocating again. So what do you say to them, and how did they get it so wrong last time?
Well, when we went through the process, there was 280 submissions for 1-to-1, and 1 submission for the one that ended up being. And the college went with the 1 instead of the thing. And we didn't have any say in it after that. So whoever was in control of the college at that time felt that it was the way it would be. So
We have no idea why it ended up that way. Yeah, I was more of a bystander at that point when that review occurred. The review panels were appointed by the Appointments Council, which was not the College of Trades. And I'm not sure how they weighted the criteria to get the results that they did. So I can't speak to it. I would only say that it brings up a concern about how it gets handled on the next ratio review, so that that stakeholders like our Ontario electrical contractors are comfortable with the way those panels are formed and the individuals that are there and the criteria that are being used.
Stephen, can you speak to what the current ratios are, specifically to the electrical contractors today?
So it's 1-to-1 up until 4 journey persons, 3-to-1 for your next one, 6-to-1 after that, and then 3-to-1 after, so you're at 13, after 13 it's 3-to-1 for above that. So a small contractor that has 4 journey persons can have 4 apprentices. As soon as you go above 4 journey persons, you have to get the 7 before you can get your next one, then you have to get the 13 before you can have one more, and then you have to get the 16 before you get your next one, and then 3 all the way up.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit of history, and I hope everyone finds this interesting, but many years ago when we had what was called a PAC committee, the Provincial Advisory Committee, and I was the OEL representative on that committee, and it was kind of the first time that OEL had a representative on that committee. And at the time there was, the ratio was 3-to-1. It was 1-to-1 for the first one, then it was 3-to-1. And as a result of our working just in committee, we were able to get a bit of a sliding scale at the beginning that allowed 1-to-1, 2-to-2, and then it eventually ended up as 3-to-1. So it was a bit of a concession by the other people at the table, which was of some help to small contractors. The ratio that Steve just explained, I have no way to justify how they go from 3-to-1 to, and I believe it's at the point where you have, I think it's when you have about 16 journeymen, where you have to have another 6 journey person in order to get one more apprentice. Because
That's 7. At 7 you gotta go to
Yeah.
13.
Because we went through that at my company, and I remember thinking, I have to do what? So it's a very complex sliding scale that is, I have no way to explain it, but it's confusing.
Okay, so the health and safety case again, so what you're saying is, so you have 7 journey persons out there, and then you'd like to have 7 newcomers or apprenticeships to the field. So the health and safety cases, everybody's responsible for, there are all these new folks out there doing all this work, and there's only one person responsible for them. So does that seem like?
No, they're responsible for each individual one.
Yeah.
So you would have one journey person responsible for one apprentice. So a lot of the contractors you'll talk to, depending on the type of work they do, they work in teams of 2. So the apprentice is with a journeyman all the time, especially service contractors. And some of the information I get back from them is they'll pay for an apprentice, like customers will pay for an apprentice, but they won't pay for 2 journey persons to do the same job. So sometimes you'll hear that people just want cheap labor. Not necessarily the case. You still need to train those guys. So they need to work from and learn the trade.
Okay, so you still don't think there's significant loss of possible health and safety or training capabilities with so many people, so many apprentices, and
Well, it goes back to
so few journey persons?
Right, it goes back to what's the qualifications of the journey person doing the training. So which Don had mentioned earlier. So that's really, I think, where we need to focus more is who are the journey persons doing the training of the apprentices? And because I get all sides, and we want to make sure that the journey persons that are doing the training are good qualified journey persons so that we get good qualified apprentices. So just to expand on that a bit, some of the feedback I get from contractors is the apprentices that are trained in Canada are trained very well. We have a lot of foreign electricians that come in that can write their equivalency and get their CFQ that aren't necessarily even as well trained as some of our second and third year apprentices. So I've had those comments to me from contractors that our apprenticeship, our guys are well trained and they would prefer them over some foreign workers, but that's the avenue they have to take at some point because they have to get the journey.
Yeah, my question was for Alex. Did you sort of see any of the warning signs, given all these factors affecting the market, affecting your ability to get a job coming out of Sheridan after 2 years? Or did you kind of feel like you were sold sort of a brighter sort of story?
Yeah, certainly. You know, I don't know, that's, yes, because everywhere, you know, on the news, or I remember seeing articles in McLean saying, you know, there's total demand, why is nobody going to this? You're gonna make great money, you're never gonna have to look for a job. I mean, my parents believed it. Just anywhere in the media that's reporting on job markets in Ontario, or just in general, because it's the whole message of there's a lack of skilled workers in the trades. It's, you know, it's everywhere. But certainly I was given a much brighter story about the whole skilled trade situation before going into school.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Yeah, could you discuss further the economic case that this makes? So I think there's the recruitment and providing opportunities for apprentices, but how is it, you know, it's talked about in the sense of the economic benefit. Could you expand on that a little bit, how this will help Ontario's economy and help your sector?
So I'll give you an example from a previous role I had 10 years ago, before I even knew what ratios were. When Lowe's came into Canada, their construction methodology in the US was from the time they put footings into the ground till the time they could turn the building over was 20 weeks. In Canada, it was 24 weeks, and it was due to the skills shortage. So just the demand for tradespeople, we would just have that tough a time getting more people into the trade, and that was 10 years ago. I don't know what the number would be now. I've been out of that for quite a while. But just in terms of how quickly we can get things built, it delays projects because we just don't have the people. And that, as I was talking before about the time it takes to train a journey person, we need to be looking that far down the road to see what's our demand look like 6 to 10 years from now, and do we have enough coming into the trade that are going to be able to meet those demands in the future.
Any other questions from the floor at all?
You alluded to wages, so it's not a question of we'll have a lot of people doing work at a lower wage.
No.
Could you expand on that? Like,
So
so that's not a factor guiding this move.
No, because now wages, so if you're familiar with Bill 148 from last year with the increase in minimum wage, the contractors weren't concerned with the minimum wage because most were already paying higher than that even for a first year apprentice. So all that's done now is saying, okay, we have a new floor. We never had a ceiling. So now first year apprentice would start at $14 an hour, but it's all set in their training agreement. It's a percentage of journeyman rate. And the journeyman rate varies by municipality within the province. So it's not a wage thing.
Any other questions at all from the floor? No? Okay. I will, obviously everyone who's in attendance today will be emailing you a copy of our press materials, as well as we also have hard copies for you to take as well. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. And I think that's all for today. Thank you. And any photo opportunities, absolutely, we can do that as well. Thank you.